Hi, I'm Andy Weibel, and welcome to Timely Topics. Today we are going to be talking about the presidential election with our historian and political scientist here at Muskegon Community College, Kurt Troutman. Welcome to the show, Kurt.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for having me on, and I look forward to discussing our presidential experience.
Yeah, it's been an interesting few months here, probably over a year, I guess. At this point when we're filming, we haven't had a convention yet, but it looks like the presumptive nominees are Donald Trump on the Republican side and Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side. Is that what you envisioned a year ago?
Presumptive? Not at all. I look at these two as the earned nominees. A year ago, Donald Trump was merely 1 out of 17.
Right.
And nobody was really picking him to be the one.
Even you.
Even me. For the last year, he's done nothing but excite the base, increase voter turnout everywhere he's gone, and one by one, his opponents have fallen by the wayside. If anyone has ever earned a nomination, it's been Donald Trump, and I think this is the best thing that's happened not just to the Republican Party, but to our country in a long time, to have Donald Trump as the very, very likely nominee for the Republicans for 2016.
When you say he's revitalized the base, who is the base of the Republican Party that he's revitalized? I mean, usually we think of the base, or I think of the base of the Republican Party as evangelical Christians. But that doesn't seem who he really is attracting.
No, not at all. The base is far wider than that. This is everyone that does not like Barack Obama. That's the base of the Republican Party. And that, my friend, as you know, numbers in the millions.
Right.
He's done a great job of exciting a whole lot of voters that normally would pay zero attention to the primaries.
Why has he done a better job than, the people we can he would call insiders, or those who are traditionally linked to the base of the Republican Party? Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, even Ted Cruz. Why didn't they do better exciting that base than
boring?
Low?
Boring.
Is that why?
That's really the key. And he has indicated that several times on the trail, talking about people who are low enthusiastic candidates. Particularly Jeb Bush, he aimed his words at. Yeah, Donald Trump, he excites people in a way that they've not been excited about politics. He speaks a populist language, whether we like it or not. I mean, his words on welfare, his words on immigration, that's a populist language that many, many people respond to, both favorably and unfavorably.
So the base of the Republican Party is populist?
I think the base of the Republican Party today is, again, everyone who's not a Democrat. We're so drawn down the center. You know that. It's been 20 years in the makings. And whether it is true Republicans, I don't know if that's a base any longer. But the party is succeeding with those who are very much opposed to the Democrats. And that's the same with the Democratic Party. They're going to succeed with many who are opposed to Republicans.
This base, why don't they like President Obama? Why don't they like the Democrats? What angers them?
Well, he wasn't even born in this country. That's what many will tell us.
That's how he really got into politics in many ways, was being wanting Obama to show us his birth certificate and prove that he really can be president.
Yes, you go back 8 years ago, Donald Trump was leading the birthers, as they were called.
Right.
Show us that birth certificate. That's been a huge source of displeasure with many with the Democratic Party. The idea that a Democrat got elected in 2008, that's been a huge source of displeasure with many in the Republican Party. So this is a normal split. Donald Trump has done a great job of capitalizing upon differences and engulfing and widening those differences.
And those differences are, some would say that Barack Obama is black. He would say not Barack Obama, he'd say, Barack Hussein Obama, suggesting he may be Muslim.
Certainly.
So are these things that excite? Does he say it because he knows that's what the base wants to hear?
I think that's what many of the country, about half the country, is interested in that. Many people do believe that it's not appropriate for a black man to be president. Many people do believe that he is either Muslim or clearly has Muslim ties, as they call it. Many people do believe that Barack Obama is the wrong person for our country. And Donald Trump didn't create this. He's done a great job of exploiting it.
Huh. And do you think one reason, though, that he was able to become the possible nominee is that it was a fractured party in that there were, you mentioned 17 candidates, and there were just so many others dividing up the rest of the votes that Trump came up ahead? I mean, if it was just he against one other mainstream Republican, would he probably have lost?
You know, good hypothetical. The short answer is he was a very early candidate. So he did not join after the 16 others, but he was right there at the time. Donald Trump is not new to politics, though. As far back as 1988, rumored that President George Bush Sr. might select him as a running mate. In the 1990s, he was very much in the politics, particularly of New York City, Atlantic City, New Jersey, and other areas. So he's not a newcomer to politics. He's truly not. Most young people, of course, know him from his television reality show.
Yeah, The Apprentice, right. And some concerns of Republicans who are running against him is that he's not a true Republican. He's been friends in the past with the Clintons. He's given money to both parties. He says, well, that's just what businessmen do. But how does some of his policies, how do they differ in this populist message from maybe what we usually think of Republican positions?
Andy, far too early to get weighed down with words like policies.
He hasn't given us a lot in his speeches, but...
Not at all, nor will he. That's not the key to his success, is his policies. Think of it in a broader sense. Yes, many Republicans are not overly enamored with him. But when given the choice as a Republican voter to vote for Donald Trump, who you may or may not agree with, or Hillary Clinton, whom you absolutely do not agree with, the Republicans are going to vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah. What do you think, though? I mean, will this come out in a general election that he may not be a true Republican? Or will it be, since he's against Hillary, as you mentioned, he's just the better of the two bad choices or something like that for many? I know, for example, on trade, he's kind of a protectionist, which most Republicans tend not to be protectionists. Immigration, he might be with the Republicans, but maybe not what many believe. I mean, he's even not clearly pro-life. He says he is, but then again, he said other things to suggest he may not be.
We all remember his book, The Art of the Deal.
Yeah.
Politics is merely a series of deals, and that is not a demeaning of politics. You cannot govern a nation of 330 million people with a very rigid ideology. Thus, in order to be successful in governing, you're going to have a flexible ideology. That's one of the biggest challenges with, quote, the true Republicans. They've not been flexible enough to govern 330 million people.
Yeah.
Donald Trump has that flexibility. So it's not flip-flop. It's a question of he is going to have a malleable ideology that's going to work for the majority, not all, but the majority of 330 million Americans.
That sounds almost like a support of Trump.
Oh, very much. I think he's been the most exciting candidate we've had in several generations. Because the electorate's telling us today, they're not necessarily voting for Donald Trump, they're voting against politics as usual with the Republican Party. They're not necessarily voting for Hillary Clinton. Many of this turnout for Bernie Sanders has been politics as usual. The Democratic Party are not going to be successful. The voters are telling us that.
It is true that I think Congress is at like 15% approval rating. Why have things changed? I mean, you're a young man, but have things changed in your life in terms of how politics happens in Washington to create this upset, or is it just a perception that things have changed?
No, I think things have changed dramatically. We probably could look at the origins of this huge ideological split going right back to the Roe versus Wade case in 1973. Okay. Abortion is the most contentious issue in our country. Now, there's been many other issues that have helped driven that wedge. Mm-hmm. But when you look historically, that is where the wedge between the two parties became really a gulf that's too big to transcend. And that's the challenge we've had in the last two generations, is that our parties are so diametrically opposed. Each election, we've got 47% with one party, 47% with the other party, and an entire election's done for the 6% in the middle. This is where I think Donald Trump is a little bit different. I think he is demonstrating an ability to reach across to people of all ideologies.
So he's quite different from what the Tea Party movement, which came up, which was all ideology. But is he attracting some of those Tea Party voters as well, do you think?
The Tea Party, remember that just approximately 8 years ago, and the real key there was a very conservative Republican voter, true Republican ideals, and they'd kind of rejected at that time President George Bush as not being a true Republican.
Not conservative enough.
Correct. That movement, I think, today has switched a little bit in the sense that we hear this term outsiders. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not sure whether Donald Trump is inside or outside. I don't know that matters. But the perception is he's not politics as usual. And that's what's making him attractive. And that will come with all of his pluses and all of his minuses.
One of the Tea Party's favorite was Ted Cruz, who did do, has suspended his campaign, but he did do pretty well in the campaign. But he considers himself an outsider, but not as outside as Trump. Or why do you think he didn't quite get over the hump to beat Trump?
Sure, well, a couple of things. Ted Cruz, a very far-right conservative. Mm-hmm. When conservatives are looking for the true conservative, that's the person, both fiscally, socially, with military policy. Mm-hmm. He appeals to about 25% of the party, and it's a strong appeal. He just doesn't have the broad base to connect with the entire party, and then, of course, reaching over to those independent, uncommitted. As for outsiders, that's a term that comes and goes. Yeah. That's a term of convenience. He's a United States Senator. There's nothing outside about that, except when he needs it.
But one insider, John Boehner, said some very negative things about Ted Cruz, called him Lucifer in the flesh, and said some other things I probably shouldn't say on cable access. But he really dislikes him. He says he's the worst senator in Washington. Why is it? Because of his ideological views, or why is it that John Boehner dislikes Ted Cruz so much?
A couple of things. Former Speaker Boehner, of course, was in charge of an entire House of Representatives. Democrats and Republicans were required to get bills passed.
Sure.
Thus, he was a bit more flexible on his ideology. Ted Cruz, his real hallmark to Ted Cruz is that he's inflexible. Mm-hmm. And that's very attractive for those on the edge of the party. It's not going to be a successful ideology to capture the nomination or the general election.
Yeah. So now we've gone to Trump, a more flexible candidate, as you mentioned. But he said some very concerning things. He said it's exciting, but he said some pretty bad things about women. And was it Megyn Kelly? He talked about her bleeding out of various places in her body, which seemed inappropriate, to say the least. He said negative things about Mexicans being rapists and murderers. He wants to exclude Muslims from coming into the country, at least for a while. He's said some things that people find quite alarming. Should we be alarmed with these statements that he makes?
Not at all. I think he is very much a reflection of us.
Well, is that a reflection our candidates shouldn't be making? I mean, should our candidates be better than the populace?
Of course they should be. Of course he said many statements he should never repeat. But he said them, and the reason he's not truly been defeated for those statements, because they reflect you and I and every person in this country. We've all made statements and comments, we're probably less than appropriate. Mm-hmm. Now, fortunately, we're not subject to 24 hours of television, Twitter feeds, and what have you. Donald Trump's done a pretty good job of taking those inappropriate comments, I think he knows they're inappropriate, and spinning those in the sense that I'm a human being, I'm an average person like everyone else. Because each one of us have all said a comment we probably would not like on national television.
I had a friend who said one of the things that makes Trump more palatable for her is that she doesn't think that what Trump says he'll do will actually get done. That you're right, he is flexible, and that all this will be moderated if he becomes president. He won't build a wall. He won't exclude Muslims because he knows this just isn't possible to do. He's not going to get the Mexicans to pay for a huge, beautiful wall, the most beautiful wall you'll ever see. And that deep down, he probably doesn't even want a wall, but he just knows. I heard him say at an interview once, man, when I say, he says, if I feel like the audience is getting a little tired of my talking, I just bring up the wall, and that's when people go crazy. Is that a way to think of Trump? Yeah, he said these alarmist things, negative about people, maybe some soft policy things that just wouldn't work. That won't happen, so let's not worry.
No, I think that's not a good characteristic. First of all, we have a wall. Let's not pretend this is the first discussion of building a wall along our southern border. Now, I hope Donald Trump's willing to build a wall along that Canadian border, keep those Canadians out.
Right.
Probably not what he's indicating, is it? But the short answer is people respond to the wall comment.
Yeah.
Now, we both understand that if there is a Donald Trump presidency, he physically cannot build a wall. He would have to have legislation put through both houses of Congress. And that's going to take a bipartisan effort on that. So whether that wall gets completed or not, but make no mistake, we have a heck of a fence line running along the Southern California-Arizona border. And should that be continued along? Well, that's a populist question.
Do you think some of the things could get the United States in trouble given how the rest of the world will view Trump if he is president, given some of the things he said, whether it's about China or about NATO or about the Mexicans and things?
You know, trouble, that's always a questionable word in the era of state sovereignty. Walls are not unique to the United States. That's a pretty common dispute resolution method. Israel and Palestine have been working with that for quite some time, as has North and South Korea. Now, the effectiveness of that, I think, is proven globally to be rather ineffective, but that's another issue. It is popular. All presidents have made comments that does not play as well on the national stage as it does at home, and I think leaders know that. Maybe it is time to revisit some of our relationships. Maybe we need to take a look at NATO, whether that's still in our best interest. Americans seem very open to increasing our American military. Well, Donald Trump plays upon that very positive statement, so maybe that's where we want to spend our tax dollars.
I had dinner recently with a friend who's older, and he said Trump scares him because he said he lived through Adolf Hitler. I don't think he thinks he's quite that bad, but that Hitler, he said when he was a little kid, people said, he's not that bad. He says those things. He's not really going to do that to the Jewish people. And of course, we had the final solution, and he did. Should we worry that Trump might actually follow through on some of these suggestions?
No, not at all. I think here's what concerns me. The American public. Donald Trump is a mirror of the American Republic. If you do not like Donald Trump talking about women, we should check how the American public talks about women. If you do not like Donald Trump talking about immigration, we should check ourselves. So to me, Donald Trump is very much a mirror of us. He will not impose anything upon us. I do have some grave concerns on what our uber nationalism is willing to invest with right now, and it appears the American public is the people I'm afraid of, not a President Donald Trump.
You don't think Trump will take that populist sentiment and turn it into bad things as it happened in Germany?
I think he'll propose that populist sentiment. It's still going to take Congress to pass laws to enact any type of policies.
So, speaking of Congress, what effect will a Trump candidacy in a general election have on House of Representatives, the Senate? What do you think? Will it change the dynamics at all?
That's the biggest unknown with Donald Trump. It truly is. Let's suppose Donald Trump, he is elected. How will the down ticket, how will the, quote, the coattails prevail? In ordinary politics, if a Donald Trump was elected as a Republican, you'd see the Republican Party do well beneath him. We don't know how to predict this as political scientists with this unique candidate. Right now, it appears clear that the House of Representatives will stay in Republican control.
Yeah.
The Senate, while, again, I would bet it would remain Republican, but that's when that could change. So yes, the down ticket effect of Donald Trump, that's the great unknown.
Because he's had very little support from elected officials in Congress, right?
From the establishment, you're right.
He doesn't want it. Right?
It's still early, Andy. By the time we get to the convention, and certainly post-convention, I would imagine the entire establishment will be on board. Now, maybe that'll be a detriment. Maybe that will be the very thing that undoes Donald Trump's case in the fall.
Let's talk just briefly about the Democrats and Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. We did see the establishment candidate win there, but it was a much closer race than I think people predicted nonetheless, and it's still going on. But why do you think the establishment worked on the Democratic side with Hillary Clinton?
I'm not so sure the word worked is correct. Bernie Sanders, as you indicate, has received tremendous support. Yes, it does not appear probable he will wrestle the nomination from her, but she had a much more difficult time than anticipated. Why? The same message the Republicans are sending. Democrats are not happy with the status quo. And that's the message both parties need to take away from this primary season, is neither one's going to be successful in the fall if it is politics as usual.
But Hillary Clinton has run on, I'm a continuation of Barack Obama. Will she pivot from that in the general election, you think?
I don't know that the word pivot is the best word. I think she's going to have to identify herself as an individual. Clearly, she is hindered by the shadow of her former husband, as well as President Barack Obama. I think we'll see a very independent Hillary Clinton, and we'll see if that's what responds to the voters.
Is the fact that she's a woman help her or hinder her?
I don't believe it's helped her, yet. That's a better question for the fall. What I think is interesting is that we're coming off of 8 years of an African American president. We have a female who's likely going to be the first major party nominee for president. That's tremendous social progress. Ted Cruz, a Hispanic, was very competitive for the Republican Party. We're seeing this diversity right in front of us, and that to me is very positive, regardless of who wins the presidency.
Sure. Do you think how Trump, given some of the things he said, for example, with Hillary Clinton, he said that if she can't satisfy her husband, how can she satisfy the United States? Will he go after her in some ways that bring out the fact she's a woman and that some people don't think a woman should be president?
Oh, I think very much. If I was advising Donald Trump, that's one thing you would want to advise him to do.
Wait, but are you suggesting that, if you're advising him to get elected, you're not saying that's the right thing to do?
I'm not saying it's the right thing at all. I'm saying from an electability point of view, you cannot give up the female vote to Hillary Clinton. You have to fight for that female vote. And part of fighting for that female vote is casting doubts upon the qualifications of a female. That was the same game plan that was used in the last 2 elections against an African American. So I would be very sure, no matter who the nominee possibly would be, that questioning the ability of a female, that still rings well in our society, unfortunately.
I don't hear people saying, I wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton because she's a female. Maybe we know not to say those things. Trump might, but most people at least keep it under the radar. But they do say that they don't trust her. Is that because of some things that she's done that we shouldn't trust her, or is it because she is a woman?
Well, again, trust is something that is earned or built with individual and very personal contact. The vast majority of us have never had personal contact with Hillary Clinton. So when I hear the trust issue, I see that as a 21st century method of saying, I don't want to vote for a woman.
Interesting. How has Bernie Sanders changed the campaign? And do you think that's been has he been good for the Democratic Party as perhaps Trump has been for the Republicans?
Oh, he's been wonderful for the Democratic Party and for the United States public at large. The idea that this was a contested campaign, a contested primary on both sides, that's American democracy. That's a positive thing. Bernie Sanders has had a very good imprint on this election, and I would very much look forward to seeing him as part of the governing regime if the Democrats are successful.
Even though he's really been an independent his whole life.
Sure has, yes. Independent/socialist, which reflects part of our country. Maybe there's our Secretary of Education.
Really? Put him in there. So do you think Bernie Sanders will have an impact in terms of maybe future candidates? Some have suggested Elizabeth Warren is a candidate that's close to his position, such as a more democratic socialist approach.
Yes, what it appears for the near future is that the Republicans will keep moving to the conservative edge and the Democrats will keep moving to the liberal edge. I don't know that we're back into an era of moving together yet.
Although it seems to me that Trump might be more centrist than that.
And that, I think, is the very appeal of Donald Trump in the fall campaign of 2016.
Wow. Well, thanks, Kurt. We look forward to seeing how all this pans out and appreciate your insights.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being on television here and sharing some thoughts.
All right, thanks. And thank you, everyone, for watching. We've been talking to Kurt Troutman, who's a professor of history and political science at Muskegon Community College. If you'd like to know more, Kurt has a lot of classes coming up this fall, and I'm sure he'd love to have you in there with him, as well as you see him all around the public and on TV. Feel free to ask him questions. He's quite engaging, as you can see. So thanks, everyone, for watching. Until next time, have a great day.